marvelous teaching. Boy, was it heavy. But one night, he sort of lightened up, and he pointed to a newborn baby girl at the back of the room, lying in her mother's arms. And he was explaining original sin, how we are all born in sin, and in order to be freed of that sinful nature, we have to appropriate Christ's death on the cross. And he very carefully explained the gospel message to us. And he said, that baby girl at the back of the room, when she becomes older, she needs to turn her life over to Christ because she was born in sin. It's an inherited disease, literally. And I'm thinking, that's a terrible thing to say about that gorgeous baby. But the mother, who was one of those born-agains, didn't seem to be very worried. And she was just nodding in agreement. And so I left that evening and surrendered my life to Christ. I thought, gosh, if he's talking about that child, I have lived life a lot longer. I need to accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And as I said, I had never done that up until now. And that was the night I did it. Now, the amazing thing is, that baby grew up and married my son Mark in 1999. Isn't that cool? So the analogy that the Bible study teacher used to bring me to Christ is my daughter-in-law Sarah, which is very cool. And as I was doing this and writing this out, as I like to do, it dawned on me that both Mark and Sarah were instrumental in Alex and I coming to the Lord, even though they were just babies. Isn't that interesting? And the other interesting thing I found was that God had to move us approximately 6,000 miles from Glasgow, Scotland to Newport Beach, California, for us to hear a gospel presentation which we would accept. Very cool. I love God's hand on our lives, and I'm sure every one of you has a similar story of how he played, as has been described, the hound of heaven, and brought you closer into a personal relationship with his son. So Mark was born, he grew up, he became a cute little toddler. He accepted Jesus when he was about 5 years old because his friend Scott Kroll told him that if he didn't have Jesus in his heart, he was going to hell. and he did. He asked Jesus into his heart in a hurry, and it really took. And so never discount a young child's commitment. Of course, during his teenage years, when he was at Cape boarding school, I'm sure he drifted away, but that was the anchor on his soul, and he never strayed from that. He was at Cape School in Santa Barbara for 4 years, loved it. He was your typical California surfer, skateboarder, snowboarder, anything to do with a board. He was on it. And we were really surprised when he said he wanted to go to Wheaton College. I had thought Pepperdine. I thought, with the nice surf break right there, Rincon, or maybe one of the other California schools, but he decided he wanted to go to Wheaton. He felt God was calling him to Wheaton. And we knew Wheaton, and we knew it was a fabulous Christian school, and we said, fine. So he had 5 years there with a double major at the end. We had actually thought he would go into medicine like his dad, but Allison, my daughter, who's sitting at the back there, decided to follow in her father's footsteps and is a pediatrician today. But somewhere along the line, Mark decided he would like to be a Navy SEAL. Not just a sailor. The idea of being on a big ship, no way. But a Navy SEAL, that really piqued his curiosity. And he was very focused about it. I saw him, he'd start exercising, and I could see muscles appearing that weren't there before, and he'd be running on the beach and swimming in the ocean. He did swim like a fish. He wasn't so good at the running part, but he could swim really well. And so the Navy SEAL thing was interesting, and we sort of sat back and thought, you know what, he's got to get through the training. I don't know whether he'll make it through or not. But he did. Hell Week was hell. I mean, it really lived up to its name. For those of you who don't know, for a whole week, they only about 2 15-minute periods of sleep, and the rest of the time they keep them up. They're in a simulated war situation with, guns blazing and firecrackers going off, and they have to crawl through mud pits with dead animals. They have to run along the beach with pylons on their heads and boats on their heads, so much so that when he came home, he literally was bald on the top of his head with all the wear and tear. And I didn't know whether he'd make it through, but he was determined to do that, and he did. Alex was out of town when the word came that we had to go down and pick him up because he was in no state. They wouldn't allow any of these guys that had survived Hell Week to come home on their own, to drive themselves home. So we had to go down, or I had to go down and pick him up, which was really interesting because I went into the barracks where all these guys were laid out on their beds, half dead, and this huge, burly Navy SEAL guy came over, and I said, I'm here from, I thought I sounded tough, I'm here from Metherell. And he said, no, Metherell, come on over, your mom's here. And so Mark came staggering over. He was literally in, congestive heart failure because he had exercised so hard and so long. He had so much edema. His fingers were like sausages and his legs were just, no ankles, just so swollen. So we sort of half threw him into the back of the car and he slept off. But before we left, I turned to the Navy SEAL and I said, and what do you think you've done to my baby? This is my firstborn, and look at him. And the guy sort of guffawed behind his hand and closed the door and we were off. But Mark loved the SEALs. He had so many phenomenal adventures. He loved special forces all over the world. The Thai special forces he was especially fond of. He was with the SAS. He went to Korea. He went to Iraq with the falling of Saddam Hussein during that time. And he went to Afghanistan. And the Afghan people were by far his favorites. He loved, especially the children. He thought they were such a beautiful people. And always had in the back of his mind possibly adopting one of the little children. So the curious thing is, he was invited to a wedding, and that for a foreigner is supposed to be really special because they liked him, and I think it was the mutual respect that he had for them. So now we're getting a little closer to the sad part because he was in the SEALs for several years, and I was always worried about him. But there was 1 week that I was especially worried about him, and that was the week of April 11th, 2008. And the last time we spoke to Mark was 24 hours before his death. He was on a satellite phone, calling from Baghdad. I told him to be very careful. I said, you know what, I've been watching Fox News all day, and the terrorists are lobbing rockets into the green zone, so watch your back. He said, Mom, I'm fine. But that's what he always said. I'm just fine. I'm having an exciting time. I'm just fine. Don't worry. And then his last words to us were, I love you both. He had previously told us that if anything happened, he'd be on the greatest adventure of his life, which he's on today. Because being a believing Christian, we know that he is probably having a majestic time in the universe, and it's us that are stuck in the pit. But it's wonderful to imagine the adventures that he may be on today. For Alex and I, these 2 years have been the most challenging, obviously, and never a day goes by but we don't miss him. Each day brings me closer to seeing him again. And some of you can relate to that. And I really look forward to the time when we'll have a wonderful anticipated reunion. The one thing that keeps me anchored is my belief in the sovereignty of God. This happened for a reason. I don't know what the reason was, although we have recently heard that because of Mark's death, there were so many Navy SEALs